All right, perfect. We are live. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Joseph Kopser. Welcome this Saturday afternoon to another one of what I call these Catalyst Talks. Catalyst being named after the book that I wrote a couple of years ago with Brett Boyd. But the reason why they're live is because all this information I'd like to be pushed out as real time as possible. So my guest today, Shannon Sentell, a longtime friend, and we've been for a long time in the last 5-6 weeks doing these videos trying to get him on. But he is actually at the front lines in many regards, which we'll get into in a second. So Shannon, before we get into your biography, I just want to remind everybody that's tuning in as they're making comments or they're asking you questions in the comment section below on YouTube or Facebook, that really the reason why I'm doing these is because in the early days in the Army, the way I learned how to be a lieutenant was talking to platoon sergeants and first sergeants and the other members of the lieutenant mafia. The way I learned to be an entrepreneur was ask questions of all the entrepreneurs that were out there. One beer at a time, I learned how to do that. In this era of COVID, there's not a lot of people that have gone before us anything close to what we need to know today. So as I started to call and ask all my smartest friends and colleagues, what do we need to know? What's happening? What next? The conversations were so engaging, I decided to put them online live using new technologies, first Zoom, now StreamYard. And the whole purpose is to remember three groups of people. The first is those caregivers that are caring for the sick, those healthcare workers and the first responders who are right there at the front lines. That second group are those that are now immediately out of work, that don't even know necessarily how they're going to pay their next bills. And then that third tier are those small businesses and groups that are really trying to hold it together. And Shannon, the reason why it's special having you here today is you really represent that top tier and that bottom tier. The bottom tier being your company, the hard work that Stealth Power is doing to be able to stay in business and be able to deliver. But the most important reason why is the people that you're delivering to are, in many cases, your customers are first responders, those that are in the medical industry around ambulance, fire, and police, which we'll get into in a minute. So Shannon, thank you for being here. I'll tell you a quick story in your bio for the folks that are viewing in that don't know you. Graduate of West Point, spent 20 plus years in West Point, taught many years associated with physics and nuclear engineering, got a master's in nuclear engineering from MIT, PhD in nuclear engineering from South Carolina, served as a congressional liaison for the Army and Congress, worked also in the Pentagon directly for the Army Chief of Staff, George Casey at the time, then left the Army, retired to Austin, Texas, and now working for a smart energy company directly on the front lines of what's going on. So it's great to have you. It could only be a Saturday because you guys are working almost nonstop. So Shannon, thanks for being here. First question is, how's the family? And then beyond that, let us know what things are like in the current state of affairs of your company. And then we'll get into more questions after that. And there's already questions coming in from folks, which I'll kind of help narrate as we go through.
Well, thanks for having me, Joseph, and I appreciate it. And it wouldn't be a true Shannon and Joseph conversation if I didn't have a chance to not talk until about 4 minutes into it.
There you go. That's the way it works.
So thanks for asking about how the family's going. We just moved into a new house, literally put the stuff on the wall behind me about 10 minutes ago because it was a bare wall at that point. COVID has caused all types of issues, not only in personal life or professional life, but in the personal life with us moving. But the family's all safe. My parents are safe. My wife's parents are safe back in the Carolinas, and everybody is taking care of each other and doing what we have to do on the social distancing side. Yeah. On the business side of the house, we've seen an uptick in the past month. We actually started seeing some early indicators.
And do you want to explain to viewers what it is Stealth Power does?
Yeah. So what Stealth Power does is we design, manufacture, and either directly deploy or aid in the deployment of smart energy systems that turn engines off. Everything from the engine in a motor vehicle that goes down to police vehicles, all the way up to fire trucks, to standalone generator applications where very large generators, think in the kilowatts capacity on standalone sites, at oil and gas sites, surveillance sites,
So basically, if it has an engine that normally runs a lot or a generator, you all are there to provide a solution.
Correct. Yeah. And we do that through some idle mitigation efforts, energy storage systems that involve lithium, solar, wind, all types of different combinations that put together to meet the customer's needs.
Yeah. So the first question I have for you really goes to what you're seeing with your customers that are in the ambulance side of this COVID experience. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing and what your learnings are there.
So what I started to say early on was on the first responder side, we were seeing some very early initial indicators. I guess leading indicators is probably the best way to say it. Our largest state and local customer is FDNY, the Fire Department of New York, and they have 600 frontline ambulances, 400 of them deployed on a daily basis. Back at the beginning part of February, I was actually in New York meeting with the fire commissioner. We have a strong presence there with a stealth power office forward in that location. And they were already starting to make the plans to say, this is a very concerted effort that we're going to get into probably in the next 30 to 45 days that's going to really strain the capacity of FDNY like nothing we've ever seen before.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I'm not going to say what they said, but some of the trials and tribulations they went through on some very peak days, and what we've seen over the past month has surpassed that in both response and death toll. So it's been very challenging for them. So a couple of the things that we've seen, they're the largest fire department on the planet. They normally respond to upwards of 3,000 to 3,500 calls a day. Just last week, I spoke with the fire commissioner, and they had responded to 7,200 calls in one 24-hour period. 7,200 calls in one 24-hour period. And what we've had to do is we've had to surge resources into New York City to keep up with the demand that they're seeing. You see the news reports out there that they're not responding to cardiac arrest or things like that anymore. All that's true. It's to a point now where the ability for the department to handle just the COVID-related response, and three things: one, take care of their crews; two,
Yep.
take care of the people that they're responding to; and then three, take care of the facilities that they're bringing those people back to. Are the mitigate or the efforts that we've been involved in.
So for people that are viewing in from across the country that don't have firsthand experience of what it's like in New York right now, and the stories that you're hearing from the people that you work with, give a couple of anecdotes for them to try to wrap their mind around how intense it is in these hot zone issue areas like New York City.
Okay, so what normally happens in New York City specific is on a given day, just a normal day, COVID notwithstanding, all of their ambulances respond based upon demand. They sit on street corners. They don't come from a hospital. They don't come from—
That's right. And they're using data from previous times to inform where these ambulances sit.
Correct. And based upon that historical data, they will forward deploy ambulances and have them sitting waiting for calls. That worked for the most part up until we started to see this great surge of calls coming in. Now the ability to place ambulances in those same hot spots, they don't have enough ambulances, or they didn't have enough ambulances. So the city has actually gone in and upped their ambulance count by about 200 ambulances over the past 30 days. And we're not talking about a small effort. We're talking about 200 frontline basic life-saving ambulances put into the fray on a daily basis.
So I'm putting these notes into the comment section. Let me make sure I just understand what you're saying. So you're saying these are 200 new ambulances, or they bring them in from other areas, or what does that look like?
They're 200 new ambulances that they have quote unquote bought from ambulance manufacturers, ambulance dealers across the country that were used as either display vehicles, demo vehicles, or vehicles that were in the pipeline to be sold to some other municipality that might not be having the type of surge that New York is seeing. And their fleet services is set up to handle about, like I said, 600 frontline ambulances. If you add 200 more to that, I mean, that's 1/3 more ambulance, 33% increase in ambulances with a reduction in your workforce, which they had to do based upon social distancing, and just a strain on resources. So it's kind of that, and it's cliche, the perfect storm. It really is, and they are not out of this fight. I mean, the New York City mayor and the New York governor are on television. They're talking about this waning effort as far as hospital beds. But just last week, we saw the largest number of calls into the EMS system in history in New York City on one day. Yeah.
So one of the things I try to do in this Catalyst Talks series, the reason why it's talks is it talks, about technology, agility, leadership, knowledge, and strategy. So speak to the technology of how all of this information from all these systems that you're putting inside these ambulances are coordinated. And I know that Microsoft Azure loved what you all are doing so much. They made you a leading star in a commercial. And so later on, we'll tag to that commercial. But how is technology helping the efforts of what's going on here?
So what we're able to see on a daily basis in New York City, actually it's on a real-time basis. We can look inside at different analytics that the ambulance is giving us that is being reported from something that's on the front end, a real-time sensor in the ambulance that's going up into the cloud to the Azure database. And then we're using Power BI on the Microsoft side to take that data and give real-time hardcore analytics to the fleet directors in the fleet services division. And what that does is that technology says the last thing we need is an ambulance that's responding to a COVID call to have an alternator go bad. I'll just say that, for example. So we can look and do some predictive analytics to say, hey, the alternator on this particular ambulance is not charging the battery at the voltage it needs to be. We flag that, send a email alert directly to the fleet services director and to the captain of that firehouse. And those folks are able to immediately pull that ambulance back into the fleet services division and make the repairs before they see it out on a street corner.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost predictive in a way when you see the early numbers. So another question, so because you have all this telemetrics and you have all this ability to trace where the ambulances are, have you had any discussions yet? And if so, expand. If not, we'll move to another question about Corona trace capability in terms of when we see exposures and when an ambulance goes to a certain location to be able to help, because we know that trace has got to be a part of this going forward.
So that's a very interesting question, Joseph. And the amount of information that we are able to provide to them has that data. They came to us and asked us to basically pull all the levers that we could on data. I'm not in the room where all these decisions are being made, but I'm pretty sure that the levers that we've pulled for these guys are probably leaning toward what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say with 100% certainty, but with the amount of information that we're collecting on a real-time basis, people making those decisions should be using that information.
Yeah. So unless there's any other questions coming in from the crowd or Jeremy Nathan harassing you for being a fashion model in the AOG magazine back in the day, the other thing I'd like to get into is the energy aspect, because even beyond COVID, your systems were already doing great things in terms of idle reduction to turn a traditional, gas or diesel burning engine off when it wasn't needed, and then using your generator or your battery storage capability or energy storage capability to power the electronics and the computer and everything going forward. So from a Catalyst standpoint, speak to the energy aspects of what you all are doing and what it might mean going forward, despite or notwithstanding COVID.
So despite or notwithstanding COVID, here's a quick example of that. Our traditional system on a vehicle, we're seeing a minimum of about 30% reduction in idle time. So you say that you think, okay, 30% is a good number, maybe not that much of a big number, but it's a good number.
Sure.
What that does is that translates into three things. It translates immediately into fuel savings for that vehicle. So 30% reduction in your fuel cost across the board in your fleet. 2, a 30% reduction in the maintenance, because if the vehicle isn't running 30% of the time, the engine hours that are going on that engine are not counting against the maintenance requirements of it. And then 3, and one of the most important ones for large cities like New York, is the impact on the environment. So the ability for us to use advanced energy storage techniques in combination with idle mitigation is having a great impact in those three areas. And if you turn the COVID lever back on, you can see that what's going to happen there is municipalities across the board. And an article in Wall Street Journal just as late as yesterday said this is the tip, or not even, it's not even the beginning of what we're going to see economically in municipalities where their tax base is going to be affected. So if you look at a 30% savings and reduction in fuel costs, maintenance, and in the environment, to me, it's a no-brainer. If you're going to see that type of a decrease in the amount of your tax base coming in, you've got to be looking at mitigation efforts somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a real issue. By the way, our old friend from Hanscom Air Force Base, Sandy Dina, says hello. Actually, West Point as well. Okay, so looking forward, as we go through all of this, you are also doing work at border locations. You're also doing it on barges. There's all kinds of other applications for your technology. Kind of just dip your toe into what that looks like and all the other opportunities that you have that are out there.
So what's happening these days, and I was going to lead off with a quick story. This time last year, every single person in the United States, depending upon your political persuasion, was focused on the border, and we were seeing the largest surge in real-time crossings of people seeking a better place to live, a better economic situation, a better personal situation for their families. And we were right in the middle of that last year. And we went through a large surge then. And quite ironically, about a year later, we're right back in the middle of it again, but this time in a different area. But to your question, what that does is that has given me, as the technology developer in the company, a very large swath of information and experiences over the past 12 months to kind of see where this technology does fit in going forward. And the combination of what you just said, the technology with the energy storage, our ability to capture sun and wind, place that into a storage technology, and then provide that to a customer so that they don't have to have the petroleum distribution network. They don't have the engine running, the mechanical side where they don't have to have the maintenance.
Just to interrupt, to prove a point, to help people visualize, if you've got an energy producing station or platform somewhere in a very remote rural area, or it's a tower or it's surveillance in a very remote area, the previous way of refueling it was a pickup truck and a contractor and a gallon, 5-gallon gas container. I mean, that's what we were talking about, right? And you've just
we went everywhere from, and I'm not making this up, where a federal agency came to us and said, we need your help with an energy storage system because we're literally sending 5-gallon fuel cans in the back of a backpack of a worker up to a hilltop 2 a day to keep this site running, because that was the capacity of the fuel tank on board.
Yeah. Yeah.
From that,
1898 called and they want all of their technologies.
Yes, exactly. So from that all the way up to, say, a locomotive, which is a 300 horsepower engine, which is burning fuel at a ridiculous rate and being refueled at a ridiculous rate. So we are spanning that entire gambit. But to your question, what we're doing is we're tying that together, that energy saving, with the metrics, the analytics that you spoke about. And we're giving the customers the ability to make informed decisions at the leadership level to say, hey, we need this technology, not in just these areas inside our infrastructure, but across a wide range. It's like you said at the beginning, anything that an engine is running on a petroleum-based fuel, we can control that engine, turn it off, and run on smart energy for a good portion of the time. Our border solutions are averaging 90 to 92% fuel savings and diesel engine cutoff.
And ultimately that translates into lower costs for the taxpayer, more efficient use of resources, and then it all trickles down hopefully to more effective government, because many of your customers are government in addition to private sector. So you're a dual use technology.
That is correct. The dual use technology, all of that trickle down, and we've seen good success inside the federal government in static locations, in municipal and state governments, in vehicular locations. I mean, at the federal level, there are so many applications. I see Jared just wrote in and said, "What about a 30% reduction in the idle time for a brigade combat team?" Yeah. I mean, imagine that. Imagine being the S4 in a brigade combat team and say, hey, if we could cut down on 30% of the log pack effort, what would that mean as far as putting people in harm's way, reducing the amount of time that our vehicles are spent?
And for subject matter experts that are out there, compare your technology to what folks like Jared Heisler and others might remember from AP units of set APU, auxiliary power units, from say 20 years ago.
So the difference in our technology is that for the most part, in pretty much every application that we have deployed at this point, the user is not involved in the decision. So leadership has made the decision to take the user out of the loop unless it's an emergency situation, and our system makes the decisions for turning the engine on and off. And we use any number of metrics to do that: the voltages, the sunlight, what the temperature is outside. I mean, we can customize how that engine is turned on and off through the customer interface. The customer can go and do it. They can go and change. If it's a wintertime scenario, they can go in and say, hey, we don't want our people to be cold. Let's don't turn the engine off if the temperature gets below 40 degrees. I mean, we can customize all of that. Back in the day, the APU was something you had to make a conscious effort to go make sure that, one, it was maintained, two, it had fuel in it, three, start it. And, if it became too cumbersome, people never used it.
Yep.
Now the end user never even knows that it's turning on and turning off, because the vehicle works the same way, whether the engine's running or whether the stealth power system is engaged.
So another channel that we're streaming on is Bunker Labs. And so we know that there are entrepreneurs that are listening in or will be watching this video later on when it's stored, not necessarily live. So if they were to ask a question about innovation and about the ability to pivot, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs in this time and effort? I mean, I know that your hours have pretty much tripled. You're not one of the people that get to stay home and watch Netflix from end to end. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs out there in this era of COVID about their ability to adapt or be agile?
Well, I would go to a very interesting piece by Josh Baer about a week ago that he posted on Instagram, and it probably made it on a lot of platforms, where he talked about the 5 different bins that startups or entrepreneurs might find themselves in at this time. 2 of them were pretty catastrophic. You were going to die, or the amount of time that you had remaining in existence was known. Yep. And then the other three were you're really going to have to struggle to keep your head above water. 2, you might find some special niche where you can use this opportunity to grow a little bit. And then 3, that last group, was what's happening now is actually going to propel you into the future, because the need for your technology or your idea is prevalent. And Josh said, hey, find out which one of these bins you're in. And if you're not in one of those top 2, as I kind of read between the lines, get there. Do it quickly, because if you're in those bottom 3, the clock is ticking against you.
Yeah, so you're in the hurt box. Josh Baer also had a great piece of advice that I saw on Twitter, which is, this is your chance to be a butterfly and not be a turtle. Be the butterfly and chance to really reinvent yourself and try something new, as opposed to people that just wall in, shelter in, and just cease to move. Now, I know some people like turtles out there, but the point being, this is really a chance to change it. So we're wrapping up here at the end. Shout out to Tom Coyle there. Thanks for tuning in again. What other questions or what other bit of information do you want to share that maybe I didn't ask with this short time that we have together?
Well, we always try to protect our people when we grow a business, and we've seen a lot of efforts from the federal government through the PPP, all types of efforts to allow small businesses that are really feeling the strain and the effect of COVID at this time. And I guess my piece of advice would be to continue to look to your people as your strong point. You might have the best piece of technology on the planet, and it might work and do the thing that it's supposed to, but if you don't have the backbone and the people there to support you to keep that piece of technology working in front of a customer, it's not going to do you any good. So our New York office, we've really had some strains in that location. I won't say exactly which location it's in, but the first 2 members of the FDNY team that passed away from COVID were in that facility. So we've had to make some very large efforts to protect our people in that facility. So I would just say, the entrepreneurs that are out there, again, you might have the best idea on the planet and the technology might be there or might be in a position to mature, but you have to take care of your people in a situation like this. And we're very fortunate. I mean, my guys come to me and gals come to me on a daily basis and say, we are one of the lucky companies here, because we have seen people left and right of us here in Austin have to either lay people off to keep their business going or shutter their business altogether. So they just say they're lucky to have a job. So that motivates me to keep the people aspect in the forefront.
Perfect. And that's a great way to end as we began, which is to remind folks that, our thoughts are with those people that are the sick and the healthcare givers and the first responders. And Shannon, your company and your efforts are right there on that front line, helping support what they do. That second tier, as your colleagues at work point out, are those that are out of work, that don't necessarily know how they're going to make ends meet. And then that third tier, yourself and all the other companies that are trying to hold it together to get through the other side, that may have a chance to reinvent themselves. But Shannon, thanks for being here today, and I look forward to catching up with you and having a beer in person when we're not under these shelter-in-place conditions. Take care.
And thanks for doing this, Joseph. This is very valuable.
Thank you. Well, it's the extrovert in me that's just got to get out. Take care, Shannon.
Bye.
So I want to thank everybody for tuning in again to these Catalyst Talks. As I started saying a few episodes ago, if there's a person you want to hear from or a topic you want covered, shoot me a note on LinkedIn. Just send a direct message. And I'm happy to say people are actually responding, which means that there is real interest and there's opportunities for me to cover different topics and talk to different people. You can find out more information about me and the work that I'm doing at josephkopser.com. And you can also find out more about Catalyst by going to Amazon, checking out this book. All of it deals with leadership and strategy in a changing world. And right now, in an era of COVID, there's probably no better example of the need for leadership and strategy in a changing world. Shannon Sentell and his company today are another great example of that. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you all later.